So the topic is actually KPIs, dashboards, and presenting testing reports or results to stakeholders. The interesting thing is, while I was, preparing for this, right, it just dawned on me that, I've been writing reports and I've been dropping report for my myself for as long as I can remember. But it's interesting that there are a couple things that I've not been doing. And while I was, going through stuffs, and I was seeing some interesting ideas. I was like, okay, so I've actually not been doing the full thing I was supposed to be doing. So that's just to tell you that I don't have all the answers. The whole idea is so that we all learn together, and we can also grow together, as it were, right? So let's just jump into the guys. So okay, so let me first go to the introduction. Just to remind us that QA, quality assurance, is an essential and a very important part of software development, right? QA is very essential in software development. You cannot overemphasize the importance of quality assurance. I know that in the past, a lot of companies, organizations used to downplay testing, used to downplay testers, used to downplay quality assurance, as it were. But I think that most of the organizations have now sort of grown, and I think that part of the interesting thing is people are coming to the realization that you have a lot to lose if you do not subject your application through rigorous quality assurance, and you have professionals certifying that your product is good to go to the market, right? The whole idea of this presentation is such that we can explore key performance indicators in quality assurance that would sort of help us to measure testing effectiveness. Then we'll also look at importance of KPIs, dashboards, and overall reporting as a whole, right? We would also look at why these elements are crucial for QA managers, and finally we'll explore stakeholders' expectations from a test completion report. Now, let me say this, that a lot of organizations do expect your QA managers to necessarily be the ones that would come up with some of these KPIs. They are the ones that would literally measure those KPIs and also sort of maybe come up with dashboards and all of that. But again, the test reporting side of things, as a tester, as a product quality assurance engineer, what I actually tell my team is, at the end of every test cycle, or whatever you call, either you call it iteration or you call it test cycle, I expect either of two things to be generated, right? It's either you are generating a bug sheet, or what you call bug report, or you are generating a test completion report. Either of those two things must be generated at the end of every test cycle, right? So now, so if you are not a QA lead or a QA manager yet, this is also very crucial and very important, right? So let's so we'll start with KPIs, right? So we say that quality assurance KPIs are measurable values that demonstrate how effectively a software testing process meets its objective. They help in assessing the quality and efficiency of the QA process. Of course, this guides us in measuring the progress and more importantly, is also sort of enable how we make decisions, right? Now, I mean, that's very simple and it's self-explanatory. The idea of having KPIs generally is to measure how you're performing, how your test effort. You know, you want to measure, am I meeting up with my deliverables on time? How am I doing testing right? Do I need to improve on how I run my test or whatever it is, right? That's the essence of having having a key performance indicator for quality assurance efforts. Now, the importance of KPIs in quality assurance are that it sort of ensures the quality and reliability of the software product. Now, going to that, I would give like a detailed explanation as we proceed, right? So this sort of helps us, you know, it provides insight into the effectiveness of our testing efforts. Um, so it also helps us to identify areas where we need to make improvements. Again, I'm going into further explanation. Um, Now, it also helps facilitate communication with stakeholders regarding progress and quality. Of course, this ultimately helps to better your resource allocation, enhance system accountability, and also support data-driven decision making. Um, all of these are just jargons and jargons. The summary of all of the things I've said so far is that the major reason why we have KPIs in QA generally is such that we're able to measure our test efforts, right? If you are not able to take away any other thing from all of the plenty talks I've been saying since, just take that away, that the whole idea of having KPIs is so that we're able to measure our test efforts, right? And of course, once you measure something, it helps you to sort of quantify it. And by quantifying, you're able to then tell, okay, so have I made progress or I have areas of improvement, right? That's literally what this is about. Now, the categories of the KPI. So we have, and or some persons will say that the major things that we actually measure when it comes to quality assurance. So you measure test efficiency, you measure product quality, and you also measure process effectiveness. Now let's start with test efficiency. Now, under test efficiency, things that you measure are your test execution rate, and you also measure your defect detection rate. So for your test execution rate, this typically speaks to how you evaluate the speed at which your test cases are executed, right? I mean, again, I'm just going to be working with some level of assumption that most of us here on the call are quality assurance engineers. Either you've been practicing for a long time or you've just started practicing. I'm sure that one of the things that you would have been taught when you joined testing as a profession or when you became a quality assurance engineer, however we like to package it, right? Part of the things that you would be taught is how to write test cases. Test cases is literally the bedrock of everything we do as a software tester. All right. And what this guy typically helps us with, your test execution rate, what he helps you with essentially is to measure the speed at which you are executing your test cases. Right. So you've written 100 test cases, you know, you've written 1,000, as it were, depending on the complexity of the application you are testing, all right? And um, what execution rate will help you determine is, um, are you playing? Let me use that word. All we are familiar with. Are you playing, right? Or stop playing, right? So, or you're actually doing what you're supposed to do. There's a formula for calculating this, interestingly. Um, the formula is you would get the number of your test cases. So it's usually number of test cases executed divided by the total test case planned times 100, right? So it's usually, of course, measured in percentage. That's how you determine if you are moving faster. So what that means is, I've written 1,000 test cases, and at a particular time, say at the point where I want to give my report, right? I will then do, out of 1,000 test cases that I planned for, how many have I've actually executed? So out of 1,000, I have executed, say, 150. So I need someone from the class to, now this is where I need us to be interactive. So I need someone to unmute and help with the calculation. So you have planned 1,000 test case or test cases as it were, but you've executed 150. So if you want to report your progress, what would your progress be? Remember, I said the formula is number of test cases executed divided by total test cases planned times 100.
Okay, thank you very much. So by my calculation, I'm getting 15% coverage.
15% coverage. All right, so that's not your coverage, so that's like your execution rate. Now, so if, for instance, thanks. I'm sorry I didn't catch the name, but thank you for helping us do that calculation. Now, if your sprint is for, I know most organizations, your sprint is usually 2 weeks. If you have planned, if within that sprint you said, well, I'm going to execute based on your whatever it is that you've planned. You said you've written 1,000 test cases, right? And at the end of the sprint, they ask you, what have we done? How have we progressed? And by the time you do your calculation, you are on 15%. I mean, you be the judge if you have made progress or you've not made progress. So, bottom line is that this helps, especially quality assurance managers or QA leads, to determine how the team is actually faring. I mean, if I was a QA manager and I have that kind of execution rate, I already know that there is a problem. So I think it would be the next thing for me, even if I am not presenting that to stakeholders, what that would help me to do essentially is to now get into um, the the work myself to understand, do you have a blocker, or is there a problem? Is it a personal issue, or there's a blocker generally, and you sort of help to, if possible, leave the blocker. I mean, that's really where you now come in as the QA manager or the QA lead, right? To see what exactly is the problem, right? Then I think we just from there move to defect detection rate, which is still part of test efficiency. So defect efficiency rate typically measures the percentage of defects found during your test compared to the total number of defects in the software, right? So again, what this sort of helps us to calculate is during your testing, right? At the point where you are running your test, how many defects did you find, right? And we now compare it against the entire life cycle of your testing on that software. How many defects do you find? Now, again, the advantage of this is to also help you determine how better you are catching those bugs, right? Because one of the things that we avoid as much as possible is bugs escaping to production. I don't know the policy in some of the organizations that you guys work with. I know in Sterling and Alternative Bank, you know, one of the things that is registered in the minds of every QA engineer is that once there is a production beans, right? The first person that gets asked is the QA guys, because they expect that somehow you should have caught the bug. Now, interesting thing is that sometimes you will catch the bug, but the product managers would say, "Oh, my risk appetite is large enough. Let's go to production." Again, please, let me say this, right? As a QA engineer or as a tester, your core job is not, you're not a police officer. Your job is to identify, to catch the bugs, right? Your job is not to enforce that the bugs are fixed. Let's be very clear. I know that some testers do other people's job, right? Your job is not to enforce that bugs are fixed. Your job is to identify the bugs, follow up with whoever needs to fix the bug. But the decision of, I want to fix this bug now, lies with your product manager or your product owners. Some product owners will tell you that, for the love of me, if I launch this product now, it would fetch me 100 million. And the bug that you have found, if I'm to lose any money, I'll probably lose like 1 million naira. Why do I want to delay making 100 million because of 1 million naira loss? But one thing that you owe yourself, maybe not even owing the product owner or as whoever, you owe yourself, is to properly document it in your test report. The test report that we use in my own organization, for instance, we have a comment section where we summarize everything, and there we quote, more interesting, we quote that the product owner has hearing undersigned, so that it will not get to when the begin happen, you now twist your mouth and tell me, "Oh, you guys didn't see this." No. We found it. You decided to go to production with it. Now that's just information that you do not pay for. Let's go back to our defect detection rate. Right. So how you typically, the formula for measuring that is number of defects found divided by total defects, meaning the found defect plus the ones that escaped to production, as it were, times 100. Right. So if you find 50 defects, right, when you were testing the application, you have, say, 100 defects, you found 100 defects, and by the time you launch the application, say 4 more defects were found in production, right? So what defect detection rate helps us to check is, by the time I do number of defects that I found divided by the total defect, so meaning that I find 100, but total defect is, remember we said found defect, meaning that the defect that you found when you were testing, plus the ones that escaped. So in this case, we said 100 was found, right? But 4 escaped. So the formula is found divided by found plus escaped times 100. So like I said, you found 100 bugs, 4 escaped. So who wants to help us with that calculation? I'm waiting.
Good evening. I think we're having 96.
Please, please tell us your name so that I can also
Okay.
reference that.
Okay, my name is Prince Umezorike. So we have the, yeah, we have 100 over 104 multiplied by 100 will give us 96%, I think.
Okay, interesting. So, in all honesty, right, as a QA manager or as a product, whatever, if my defect detection rate is at 96%, trust me, you are not doing badly at all. I mean, let's be realistic with ourselves. You cannot catch 100% bugs. Come on, it's almost not possible, because guess what? Sometimes it will not be as a result of you not flogging the application very well. It could be as a result of how user uses your application. Sometimes you would, let me give you guys a practical example. I mean, I've been in the industry for a while, so I have lots of interesting experience, right? And this one is not even, this is pretty recent. There's an application that you need to log in with username and a password, and also has a 2FA. All right. So when the QA guys tested, he confirmed that you need to log in with username and password, and of course, that it mandates that you impute what's it called now? The MFA, the OTP or whatever it is. And guess what? They even did negative testing, also did wrote some edge cases. You know, in their minds, they were solid that we've caught, I mean, almost all the bugs that needed to be catched. But interestingly, not too long ago, I heard that how the users were using it is so interesting that, trust me, I also didn't think about it. And since that day, it's part of the things that I look out for now. All these guys simply did was, when you navigate from the where you input username and password, you navigate to the OTP page. The path on your URL now will be slash something something, right? These guys will typically just erase this slash something something and do slash dashboard. Ideally, what should happen is the guy should tell you that you are not authorized. But it's so interesting that it just takes the user straight to the dashboard. Now, when the tester tested, the tester never envisaged that one crazy fellow would not impute OTP and would just erase slash whatever it is and put slash dashboard. Right? Again, these are things that when you were writing your test cases, you probably did not envisage that was going to happen. Please just note your question. I will take that after the KPI class. I'll try and rush from now so that we can have time to ask questions. Then from there, we'll move to product quality. Now, product quality typically refers to, again, still referring to part of the KPI. Now, this refers to how well a software product meets its intended requirements and satisfies user expectation. Again, this is to measure if our product meets the requirement. Again, there is how you calculate. So part of that, one of the things that you look out for in product quality is the defect density, right? How you measure defect density is the number of defects divided by the size of software. Now, size of software is how you actually get that is oftentimes you use the line of codes, right? So you look at the number of the line of codes that is compiled to function. So you now look at the number of defects that you found divided by the line of codes. Now that's how you sort of calculate that. Another thing under product quality is escaped defect, right? Escape defect typically, I mean, as the name implies, right? It means that bugs that you were not able to detect when you were testing, but find its way to production. And again, how you can also calculate that is your total defect found. Typically, your defect found minus the defect that you found when the post-release defect, right? So typically, you look at the numbers you're able to find minus the post-release defect, right? So that's typically how you also measure that. Sorry, I'm trying to rush now. We still have a couple things to cover, and time is up. Now, let's go to process effectiveness. Now, process effectiveness speaks to I'm getting a lot of beep beeps. Let me wrap up with KPIs. I'll take questions. Now, process effectiveness, I mean, at this bottom line is we want to evaluate how well you deliver your results in a timely, efficient, and reliable manner. Let me also emphasize this, that as much as we want to ensure that we cover bases, we do due diligence, ensure that we catch the bugs as much as we can. But again, you also need to look at time. Whatever it is that you are testing as a QA engineer, that product is very useless sitting on your table. And so when you are running your tests, you must always have that at the back of your mind, that as long as that product is sitting on your table, it is either you are you are not helping the organization to make money, right? Or you are stopping the organization from making profits. Again, let's be clear on something. It's a delicate balance that at every point in time, we have to find a way to be sure that we meet up that balance. You do not want to compromise quality for any reason in this world. You don't ever want to compromise quality. At the same time, you don't want the product to sit on your table for too long, because once you do that, you are not also helping the product, right? So for instance, you are in QA environment or whatever staging environment or whatever environment you are running your test from. And for whatever reason, maybe something is failing due to environmental problem. And you know that if this thing is promoted to higher environment where you have maybe more stable services, or you have more resource allocated, for the love of me, why do you want to keep? Again, it depends on the policy of the organization, right? But if you want to be agile, why do you have to keep that product in that environment that is failing? Why not just put it to an environment where you know you can almost get the desired results you want to get, right? Again, see, these are things that we use in sort of finding that balance, right? So again, part of the things that this process effectiveness help to measure is how sort of evaluate rather is to see how we are delivering results in timely, efficient, and reliable manner. So this speaks to quality and also speaks to time delivery. Now, the two metrics in this is obviously the cycle time and the automation coverage. Cycle time is typically the duration required to complete a specific process or task. I mean, that's self-explanatory. And again, this leads to the automation coverage, right? The essence of one of the advantage, in fact, the key advantage of automation is helps you with regression, essentially, right? So if you have to test an application rather than having to do retest and manually also now do regression, right? You can do your retest manually, then use your automation script to run your regression, right? That way, you would have saved yourself like several man hour, you know. Excuse me. Now, so again, that's the essence of, I mean, that's what automation coverage typically speaks to. So it looks at how many of your test cases have you, converted to test scripts? Are you able to sort of run as automation scripts, for regression sakes and all of that? I think that's really what. So automation coverage speaks to the quantity and the percentage of your test, that has been automated versus the things that you still perform manually. I know for some organization, when you are presenting your report, you have to present this automation coverage, the things that you run manually versus the things that you automated. Again, this sort of helps to evaluate the time it takes for testing. I think that's about it for KPI. Faith, do you want us to take question now, or you want me to finish the class, the whatever, before we take questions? Hello, Faith.
Yeah, I'm right here.
So,
Thank you very much.
no, we're not done. We're not done.
Okay.
This is typically KPI. I'm asking, do you want me to take questions, or we wait till after the entire thing before we take questions?
All right. So this is what will happen. Let's wait till after. But if you have questions, you can use the chat box now, so that once it's done, we won't have to look for that anymore. We'll just pick it up from there. You get. Please kindly use the chat box to ask the questions now. Mr. Opeyemi, continue.
Okay. All right. Thank you. I would try and rush now. So this is dashboard. I will not bore us with dashboard. Again, the essence of dashboard is essentially for managers, where you have to report your test activities over a period of time. So for instance, when you are for me, for instance, I report to director of engineering, right? So if I'm giving I have a report that I present to director of engineering after every sprint, right? My director is not interested in the details. This one, that, no, he's not very interested in all of that. All he wants to see at sort of an overview, how have you performed, right? Was there an improvement over last sprint? How many tasks were we able to complete in this sprint? Are there blockers? What the nature of those blockers? It's just a general overview of how the entire process of the testing process went over a period of time, right? So that's really the essence. That's what dashboard really speaks to. And I mean, the advantage of this is it's just a graphical representation of how that sort of summarizes your test effort and all of that. So again, I don't want to waste time on dashboard. So let's go to presenting test report to stakeholders. Again, I would also try not to waste time on this. The essence of, presenting a test report to stakeholders is a critical communication activities that bridges the gap between technical testing details and strategic business insights. This is what I usually tell my guys, right? Your test report is not even for technical people. a lot of people review reports beyond your, I don't know, again, depending on organization. I know some organizations like banks generally, where you have CAP as part of the change management process, right? You have a team of people that are not even technical. Some of them are not technical. That, you know, we review your reports. All right. I mean, if it was just a gathering of technical people, just give them your test case and let them go figure. Right. But because you now need to interpret your test report vis-a-vis your bug report or your bug sheet, as it were, you need to now be able to, you know, report all of the activities that happen within your testing cycle, and you want to report it in a way that a non-technical person is able to understand, right? That's really the idea of your test report or test completion report, or however it is that you call it, right? And now the guide to writing a good test report is you need to understand your audience. If you know that your audience would always and always be technical people, oh yeah, you can afford to write some technical jargons and, you know, do whatever it is that you want to do. But when you understand that you have non-technical people maybe your test report, and sometimes it might not even be people within your organization, it could be external auditors, you know, auditing your test reports, right? So you need to be very, you need to understand that these are the level of people or the caliber of people that will review my test report. Now, the next thing is you need to be able to structure your report properly. Now, one of the things I always tell my guys is that your test case and your test report must tell a story. It must always and always tell a story. I want to see in your test report, for instance, I want to see, okay, the beginning of your report, then you moved away from that beginning of the report, you move on to break down the activities that happened within the entire testing period. Then from there, you maybe now talk about, show me like maybe like a graphical representation of that report, right, or that activity. That's optional anyways. Then from there, you then introduce me to like an executive summary where you now break down all of the fine details that, you know, you've given. Then, you know, maybe like give comments where you now say, oh, XYZ is whatever. You then maybe advise certain things and all of that. Then maybe you now say, okay, you now go to certification where you now, the stakeholders will now, you know, you sign off, stakeholders will sign off. And you, again, it's sort of the audience, it helps the audience to sort of follow through this. They were not part of your testing activities, but they can literally tell how the progression of your testing was, right? By just your test reports, right? Of course, you look at the presentation, best practices. Funny enough, I've kind of touched on the best practices now, where I talked about the visual storytelling. You know, it's fine to use graphs, especially when you are trying to show. So again, one of the key things, personally, if you give me a test report, one of the things I look out for your test report is a summary of, like an analytical summary of how many test case passed, how many failed, how many did you, again, depending on organization, how many did you suspend? If there are scenarios where you are sort of advising modifications or you are suggesting some level of whatever it is that they need to do, I want to see, you know, that kind of detail. And if you can, give me like a graphical representation of this, right? So that I don't necessarily, so by at a glance, I can check how many percent passed and how many percent failed, or how many percent did you identify that you were able to test in this cycle, and all of those things, right? So These are things that I love to see, and I also love to see that there is clarity. Avoid using jargons. Again, like I said, you have in most cases non-technical people reviewing your report, right? Again, um, you need to also put comments, like I said earlier, put comments so that people are able to relate with your report, right? Comment that would sort of, give me an insight, like an executive summary, as it were, to everything that played out. And right, so I'm able to understand exactly what happened when you tested, how you tested it, and if there are recommendations that you are giving in your report. And so I think that's really the long and short of everything about test reporting. My final thought really is that presenting your test report is not just about sharing numbers, right? It's really about building confidence in the product quality, right? And of course, aligning your outcome, your testing outcome, with the objective and the goal of the project, right? Because at the end of the day, when you structure your test report properly, it's you're able to inform your stakeholders leaders on how to take decisions. So I mentioned that some organizations like banks have a body called Change Advisory Board, where they are the guys that will tell you, okay, we approve this change to go to production. In an organization like where I work, CAB seats, the only thing that CAB reviews, as a matter of fact, are test artifacts. As a matter of fact, because they expect that when you were testing, you would have taken compliance, their what's it called now, their requirement. You've taken business requirement. You've taken requirement from different departments, and you've incorporated all of that in your test case. And so some of them would take their time to look at your test case, and that's for the technical ones. But majority of them, they just come to CAB, they just sit, and they just look at your test report. And from your test report, guess what they do? They're able to say, okay, progress or not progress. So imagine that there are ambiguity in your test report. What that means is that for every time, they'll be bouncing your change. They'll be bouncing that product from going to the market. Because again, the stakeholders, the seniors, as it were, rely on your report to say go or no go, right? Again, and another thing that this helps you with is it sort of helps to build trust in your process, because again, your report is transparent. It highlights like a summary as well, all the activities that happened within the test cycle, right? So in conclusion, QA KPIs, dashboard, test reports are vital tools for measuring and communicating your test effectiveness within your quality assurance practices. By leveraging these metrics or metrics and visualization, team can enhance their testing processes, ensure software reliability, and most importantly, maintain clear communication with stakeholders. We have questions.
Thank you very much, Opeyemi. We really appreciate this. You really took your time to explain the concept of KPIs, dashboard, and reporting to stakeholders. And I believe we have learned a lot of things from this, and we are so grateful to have you. By now, we have, I believe everybody now knows what it takes to to convince your organization to make a particular decision that will be favorable to them and to you as a software quality assurance engineer. So thank you, Mr. Opeyemi, for that. We are going to go on to ask some questions. Some people have dropped some questions in the chat box, and I'll be reading it out to you. Shukuma asked if he asked that how do you analyze and act on KPI data to improve performance? And he also asked how to ensure that KPI are aligned with the organizational goals. You can take that, please.
Please take the first one again. I got the second one, but take the
He
first
said,
one.
how do you, okay. He said, how do you analyze and act on KPI data to improve performance?
Okay, so when you say
Analyzing.
I assume that is referring to your test, the test execution performance. If I'm correct, Chukuma, I don't want to make assumption.
Yeah,
Nice.
so Chukuma, you can unmute, please. You can unmute your mic.
Yes, 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 yes. That's what you have to do.
Okay, thanks, Chukuma. I mean, again, like I described earlier, how you measure that guy is very simple, right? So you have number of test cases divided by number of test cases executed divided by the number of test cases you plan times 100%. Now, what that gives you is a true reflection of where you have with things, right? So I give an example of if your sprint is supposed to run for 2 weeks, right? And at the end of 2 weeks, your execution rate is 50%, then I mean that's a problem. So your test lead or scrum master, in fact, I don't think scrum master should wait till that time anyways. But for your QA manager, the QA lead, then the next question that guy or lady is asking is, what's the problem? How can I improve? So it would typically mean that there is a problem. Let's even be realistic with ourselves. If after 2 weeks your execution rate is on 40-50%, right? Definitely there's a problem. So the next is how can we solve this problem? So it could be is it a tooling problem, or it's a blocker, or it could be any issue as it were, right? So the QA manager then sort of dives and delves into the matter and to sort of see how we can better help that process. But again, if you have so your organization could have like their threshold, right? So your organization could say that I expect your execution rate at the end of the sprint to be minimum of 90%, right? If you fall short of 90%, then there's a problem. That means that you've not met up with your KPI per given time. So, Chukuma, I don't know if that helps with your question.
Yes, 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 yes.
Right, thank you. Faith, let's move on to the next question.
All right, thank you. So Richard said he's just thanking you for the enlightening class.
Well, sorry, I have the two questions only. I have not answered the second one.
All right,
Oh,
thank you.
apologies. The second question, please. Apologies.
Yes, he said, how do you ensure that KPI aligns with organizational goals?
How do you ensure that it aligns with organizational goals? Again, it's very simple. Your organization, for instance, like I said, already said the goal is at the end of every sprint, you should meet up with minimum of say 90%, right? I would, depending on how your organization works, in my organization, for instance, one of the things I started lately is I actually have a meeting with my team, both because I had two banks, right? So I have a general call with both of the guys from both banks, And then I ask them, are there issues that needs me to personally come in, right? That would, impact our delivery and all of that. Now, what the guys would then do is, okay, they tell me, oh, we have this issue, there's this blocker. Um, then what I typically do is to now step in. Now, the level that I would escalate, right? You know that it's a serious level, then I'm probably looping the head of development for either of the banks, or I'm calling the developer directly myself to say, hey, there's this blocker, fix it. If it's an infrastructural issue, I'm talking to the infrastructure guys. Of course, at my level, they would want to listen, as against when the QA engineer is the one that is engaging them, directly, right? So how this would sort of help is it sort of ensures that the whoever your lead or manager is understand fully that your team is already falling short and is able to quickly get into the matter and solve it, so that we will not sort of fall short on the expectation of the organization. Because again, like I said, every task on your queue is a potential money-making avenue, or it is helping the organization to plug a potential problem that would happen in production, right? So if you are not able to meet up with the 90% expectation of the organization, then what that means is you are not meeting up with the bottom line of that organization. I hope I'm able to answer your question already. I've forgotten the name.
Yes.
Yes, yeah.
Right.
Thank you very
Even if
much.
I'm not the person that has the question, I think you did justice to that. Thank you. So Richard said he was just thanking you for the enlightening session. Manuel is asking if there is a standardized template for communicating test reports to stakeholders. I think that is about the organization. Yes, please take that up.
Yes, and you are very correct. It's really per organization. However, there are standards. So, however it is that the organization have said you want to structure your report, there are basic things that you must have in your report. You must have the project summary, where you would see the name of the project and all of those things. For me, I also like to see, even if you don't put the entry criteria, I love to see the exit criteria, right? To be sure that we have fulfilled all of the exit criteria before we're issuing these test completion reports, right? I also would, I know that every stakeholder would also love to see the analysis to say how many test cases passed, how many failed, all of this analytics based off of your test case, right? You also want to give the analytics in that your test report. And of course, lastly, you also want to have your executive summary, right? Those are standards. Any other thing you can go online, make your research, put in some fancy things. But these things that I listed, they are key things that stakeholders need to take decisions based on. Faith, over to you.
All right, thank you very much for that. Thank you so much. So we also have Richard is asking how do you manage measuring these metrics when working in an unstructured setup, like in cases where there are no sprint plans, no requirements, pre-planned cases, and so on. And you also want to know, would you like to take that, or I should take the second one with it?
Let me take that. Let me take that.
Okay.
So the interesting thing is, testing as a profession has its dynamics, right? Even for places where you plan sprints, you would always find unplanned items coming into your sprint. And why I said testing as its dynamics is that I don't know how it plays out in your organization for most of you guys on the call, but I've worked in my career. I think I've worked in like 4 or 5 places, and I can tell you for free that it's almost the same thing literally everywhere. I also interact with people. Sometimes you find that it's at the last minute that they bring you to QA, right? And so it's always about how then do you find the balance. Richard, it's very simple. You have your metrics, and you would never compromise on your metrics. Just have that at the back of your mind. So if you want to calculate your test execution rate, if you are calculating your defect detection rate, those are standards for you, right? Because it makes you professional. So however the organization is running their BS, it's not your concern. What you are concerned about is, as long as you are writing your test case. Now, let's say, for instance, there are no requirements, right? And you have to do either ad hoc or you are doing black box. Generally, you are doing black box kind of testing, right? Whichever way it is, you would have to generate your test cases. All right? And even if you are testing on the fly, which again, I don't ever advise anybody to do, because testing on the fly is subject to a lot of beings escaping that you not see, right? But let's even assume that you are testing on the fly because there are no requirements. In that case, you still calculate you might not necessarily be able to calculate your execution rate effectively, but definitely you can calculate your defect detection rate, right? But again, let me just say this to you. Even if there are no structure, if there are no standard, create your standard and enforce your standard within the team. And that's the only way you will be respected as a QA engineer. So even if there are a lot of unstructured whatever flying around, ensure that you have your own standard, right? And that standard, find a way to stick to the standard. Otherwise, you would always find bugs escaping to production. Richard, I hope I was able to answer your question.
To a very, very large extent, yes. Yes.
See, I get it, but unfortunately, it's
Yeah.
the unstructured environment kills most of our processes as a quality assurance engineers. But again, what we do typically is to navigate our way and enforce some level of structure, right? Meaning that you already know that even if there are no, again, an interesting thing. Let me just tell you this. With the advent of AI, you're generating AI from, even if there are no requirement documents, you can always generate test cases. If you can use what's it called now? If you have a Figma design, you can use Figma design. The Jira card, you can use the Jira card. You can also, use, even if there are no Figma design, the UI, take a screenshot of the application. If you know how to use prompts very well, AI can generate quite a number of test cases that will get the ball rolling for you. Now all you need to is just review the whatever versus whatever it is that you're able to find when you are doing your black box. And I mean, you're able to get enough test cases, really, right? So again, have a structure, leverage technology, and you'll be fine.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I really
Thank you,
appreciate this
Opeyemi.
feedback.
We
Yes.
appreciate you for that. So we'll take the second to the last question. We are really behind schedule. What is the ideal duration for submitting these reports? From personal experience, we have asked to submit comprehensive test reports twice. I had reservations regarding this. She's or he is asking what is the ideal duration for submitting reports.
There are no ideal duration for submitting reports. Like I said earlier, for every test iteration or every test cycle, either of two things must be produced. It's either you are giving me a bug report or you are giving me a test completion report. It's that simple. So there is no ideal or non-ideal situation. For every test cycle you go through, it's either you generate a bug report or you generate a test completion report. It's paramount because again, that's what would help your stakeholders to take decisions.
All right, thank you very much for that. So we have the last but not the least. How do you manage stakeholders' expectation in terms of delivery? Beatrice wants to know how to manage stakeholders' expectations in terms of delivery.
Do you? I think that question is. I don't want to. I don't want to give you bobo. Because you see that question is a very big one. Managing stakeholder is very interesting. It's a continuous battle. I think that in fairness, and let me just be very sincere with you guys, communication is the key word. At every point when you are running your test, ensure that you give updates. I mean, that's the essence of your daily stand-up anyways. And if you don't have daily stand-up, ensure that the product manager have like you have to give it like a daily update on where you are with your testing to the product owner or whoever that is managing the project, as it were. That's the only way, because sometimes it's possible that you, based on the plan, they allocate 8 hours for testing. I'm just saying. By the time you get into it, you realize that sometimes maybe outside of your control, um, testing has exceeded 8 hours, and then someone somewhere is bringing guns to your head, or some interesting part where developers could take like three years to build an application, and they expect QA to test it in 1 hour. I mean, these things happen literally every day. In my opinion, because it's a daily battle that I engage. So I'm sorry, I might not be able to give you an ideal answer, but the only thing I can tell you, and that has always worked for me and the guys in my team, is to ensure that those your stakeholders have an updated information on where you are with testing. That way, you are able to manage their expectation. That way, they are carried along. They understand if there are blockers. In fact, it would interest you that you will be the one that would go and plead on your behalf when they need to face like a larger, say like a more senior kind of forum. But if they are not fully informed, then they cannot help speak on your behalf. I think that the only tool is communication, clear communication to your stakeholders. Faith.
I'm here. Good evening, everybody, once again. Thank you, Opeyemi. We really appreciate this very insightful session. And thank you to everybody that participated. We like that you're here. and we hope to see you next time. But before we go, Opeyemi, we really appreciate you. Thank you. For you that people that doesn't know, I contacted Mr. Opeyemi just barely about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and I'm not even sure he's up to that. And he indulged us by accepting to be our facilitator for tonight. He's not somebody that is very free like that. As you all know, that is the head of QA in Sterling Bank, and that is not a small cap to wear, but he still found time after a very busy week to be with us. Please help me to appreciate him once again. Thank you so much, our
Thank you guys.
Oga,
Thank you for having me.
for
Phil.
being here.
Oga. Thank you.
We appreciate you. All right, so guys, before we leave, I know you've been on this call for a while, and this is not the usual time that we spend, but it is what it was worth it, right? So I'm going to be sharing with us what we are planning for you tomorrow. Yes, we have a very special meeting tomorrow. It's a fireside chat with Luxon. I've shared with you Luxon's bio yesterday, and Luxon is the president of Zimbabwe Software Testing Qualification Board. We all know ISTQB. You all know ISTQB, right? So he is the president of Zimbabwe Software Testing Qualification Board, and is going to, right from Zimbabwe, is going to be having a conversation with us, and I would really like all of us to be there so that we can enjoy this together. You know, I shared a link on the community this week. I wanted you to ask a question before the program starts so that we wouldn't waste any time asking for question right on the call. So we have prepared some questions, and we're going to be asking him several questions that has to do with challenges that are facing software testing engineers. And he's also going to be sharing his own story with us, how he was able to rise to this point where he is right now. So please, the meeting is by 10 a.m. I believe by 10 a.m. I will have about little, like not less than 50 persons on the call. If I am in the right direction, kindly drop your favorite emoji. Yeah, you people will not join. Oh, yes. Thank you. So, and I think that's how I'll be rounding it up for tonight. Thank you very much. Please do not join the meeting late, 10 a.m. Somebody is going to be joining us from Zimbabwe, and we do not want to keep him waiting, please. 10 a.m., please. Thank you very much. I really appreciate you.